Like we've got a good number of folks who have joined us, so we'll go ahead and get started. Again, thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Adrienne Nearday, and I have the pleasure of serving as the director of the North Carolina African American Heritage Commission. And first off, I just want to thank everyone who is joining us this evening. I know it's a busy season for a lot of folks, so I appreciate you taking the time out. But I also wanted to thank everyone who has contributed to this project. First and foremost, the community members, several folks who have joined us this evening. Much like much of our work with the African American Heritage Commission, we are so fortunate to be able to partner with communities across the state. And it is really, especially with this project, is such an example of us partnering with you to help execute this vision of what this project will ultimately be. And we've been so grateful for the opportunity to share with you. But I also wanted to thank our colleagues in the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, Michelle Lanier and her team at State Historic Sites, our Poet Laureate, Jackie Shelton Green, Janine Bryant with Facilitate Movement, Tiana West, the Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Corridor, Carolina K-12, UNC African Studies Center, Ann Chin and the Middle Passage Ceremonies and Port Markers Project, as well as the project team here within the African American Heritage Commission. So that includes my Associate Director, Natalie Rodriguez, who will be speaking in just a little bit this evening, Kimberly Kandros, who is the DNCR Grants Manager, who has worked very closely with us throughout this process, and then our incredible artist team, David Wilson and Stephen Hayes, who we will have the pleasure of hearing from later on this evening. None of this portion of this project would be possible without the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation. This is funded through their Inclusive Public. It has been a difficult season for folks to do work like the African American Heritage Commission does. And we have been so grateful to partner with them and to have such extraordinary support, because it's a challenging project through many aspects. So we've certainly enjoyed having the opportunity to be able to execute this. So in terms of how we've set up our schedule, I really wanted this to be an opportunity for us to provide a very full update. There are some folks who have been with us from day one in this process and have probably heard a lot of these things before. And then there are some folks who have joined us along the way, and it might be the very first time that you're hearing us speak about this project. So I really see this as a level setting opportunity so that we can be on the same page in terms of how we're going to move forward and what the finish line of this project looks like at this point in time. So I'll start off with just some of this introductory work, then hand it off to our Associate Director, Natalie Rodriguez, to discuss some of the education components. And then we'll hear from our artist team, David Wilson and Stephen Hayes, to see our final design updates. And then we are looking to have time at the end for questions. So if you have any that you're thinking of, please feel free to hold it for that time. Or if you'd like to put them in the chat during the presentation, we can do our best to take a look at those throughout. So in terms of this project, for those that are less familiar, we, the North Carolina African American Heritage Commission, serve with a mission to preserve, protect, and promote North Carolina African American history, art, and culture for all people. And this is one of our primary initiatives, the Africa to Carolina project, as we call it. And how this started was way back in 2018. The commission was on a visit to Washington, D.C. at the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. And we were really issued a challenge. They pointed out that North Carolina as a state has not done a great job in acknowledging this history, the history of enslaved peoples being forcibly brought from Africa to our coast. And we saw this challenge as a real opportunity for us to engage in communities and to see what we as a commission could do to address this issue and to make sure that this is not such an unknown history in our state. So we started, as we do with many of our projects at the commission, with community engagement. We had meetings with descendant communities across the coast of North Carolina, north to south, and we sat down and had a lot of conversations and really came out with three pieces that have really been the guiding framework for how we have continued this work. And one was folks acknowledged that we just did not know a lot about this history. And that is because a lot of research had not yet been done. There was a single article written in late 80s, early 90s that said, yes, this did happen here. But otherwise, the general narrative that's often taught, if folks know anything about this history, was, oh, North Carolina, our coasts were too complicated, the ports were too deep. Those types of ships did not come in here. Well, we knew that that was not the case. So this was a really good opportunity to dive into this history. It started in a couple of components. We were able to bring in a DNCR HBCU intern, Miranda Clinton, who did kind of the first pass of research. And then in later years, we were able to get a Institute of Museum and Library Services, that's a federal grant, IMLS, where we brought in a research fellow, Amber Pelham, who really did a deep dive in on the primary sources, those documents that were created at the time period that these things were happening. So that's things like court records, newspapers, letters that different people would have wrote about shipping and things at this time period. And we're really able to narrow down some specifics about locations in North Carolina, numbers, and specific vessels when they were coming and going. So through that research, we were able to identify 7 sites of disembarkation in North Carolina, and that includes Bath, Edenton, Roanoke, Beaufort, New Bern, Brunswick, and Wilmington. And as we continued these conversations with communities, we kept hearing over and over again that as we were finding this information, communities wanted to make sure that that information was accessible, that it wasn't just, something that got published in an academic journal and that folks didn't hear about. They wanted to make sure that communities had the opportunity to engage with this history. So that emerged in 2 parts, one being our website. So we have a really great web portal that Amber Pelham put together for us that details and talks through all of this research, kind of a digital humanities project, if you will. And we also created several exhibits. So there are traveling copies of exhibits that have been making their way across the state, but then there are also individual exhibits that were printed for a number of DNCR sites. So that's Edenton and Somerset Place State Historic Site, Roanoke Island Festival Park, the Maritime Museum in Beaufort, Tryon Palace, Bath State Historic Sites, and then Brunswick Town, Fort Anderson State Historic Site are places where this exhibit is currently housed. And then the third and final thing that we heard from communities was that they wanted a way to physically mark this history. And they didn't just want a historical marker. We love a historical marker with the commission, but communities were really saying that they wanted a more physical space where they could sit and reflect and contemplate and really take on this history, because it's a difficult subject matter to really address and confront. And they wanted to make sure that there was an intentional space created for them to address this history. And that's where this kind of final chapter of the Africa to Carolina project comes in with this inclusive public art project and the vision for our public art piece. So we initially, as we kicked this off, we had a small planning grant from the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation where we did a series of community engagement sessions. That's when we were first able to bring David Wilson and Stephen Hayes to our team. And this was back in kind of fall 2022 into the very top of 2023. So that was one of the times that we came out to communities to start thinking about what the design would look like, to start having those conversations and getting some really intentional feedback from folks. And from there, we then found that we were able to get the full grant from Z. Smith Reynolds to launch into this phase of the project. So this was starting in 2023. We had a lot of layers of approvals and things that we had to work through as a state entity within the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. And then we did, again, another round of community engagement in the fall of 2024, right on through the top of 2025 in January. And this community engagement took a couple of shapes. So one, our sessions that we've come known to do. We had an excellent facilitator, Janine Bryant, who did a number of those with us. And then we also did a number with Jackie Shelton Green, our poet laureate. And she created a format of workshops that where she works with the public to help create prose and poetry to address traumatic history. And ultimately, she was able to piece the prose that the community put together to create a beautiful piece that will be reflected on the public piece. And when we take a look at the rendering in a few minutes, in a little bit here, we'll be able to take a look at where that will be showing up on the piece. But we were really grateful to be able to have so many rounds and opportunities to meet with you all, to meet with folks and discuss what the ultimate vision is. So in terms of where we are now, we are really kind of starting the actual construction process in earnest. Very excited to be at this stage. So in September, we received the official approval from the state construction office. There was always a whole thing to do construction on state property, and specifically at a state historic site like Brunswick Town, Fort Anderson. It's an incredibly historic space, so needing to be intentional about exactly where it was going and exactly making sure that we're not disturbing anything historic that is in the ground there. So we're good to go on that. We are in the midst of fabrication and engineering review. That is in process. And then in this month and then into November, Stephen Hayes, one of our artist team, is known for creating these really beautiful bronze pieces that will be incorporated as part of the piece. And I'm putting this out here now. We're getting to the last possible opportunity. If you are one of the folks that we've engaged with in the community that is feeling called and interested in possibly being one of the individuals who is cast. And when I say cast, I mean it's kind of like paper mache type process of being covered in layers so that your likeness can be copied in bronze. We are looking for younger individuals. We have youth that will be featured in the statue, as well as adults to be representative of the folks that would have been brought over from Africa. So if you are interested, please get in touch with us as soon as possible. I'll make sure that our information is in the chat so that you can get in touch with us directly, because we got to hit the ground running with that. Because we need to have the molds delivered to the foundry in November. So we're on a good timeline with that. Then as we get towards springtime, February, that's when site preparations will begin. Fabrication will be at about 50% as we roll into March. And then by May, the foundry will have completed their work. We are aiming to have our site prep finalized and begin the process of shipping the arts elements to the site and beginning installation, all with our final deadline being June of 2026. That is when the art installation will be completed, do the whole final punch list and all those things in the construction process. And then we will be hosting the unveiling celebration. Obviously, we don't have the exact date on that yet, but rest assured, we will make sure that the folks that are joining us this evening and who have long been part of this process will be invited, because we would certainly love to be able to celebrate with you when we get to that point of the project. With that, I know we're laying a lot of information on you folks this evening. So again, if you do have questions at this point, please feel free to leave them in the chat. And again, we will have space towards the end of the presentation to discuss further. But with that, I would love to pass it on over to our Associate Director, Natalie Rodriguez, who is going to discuss another portion of the grant that we've been working on, particularly through this past year in terms of education components and wanting to engage other communities with this work as well.
Thank you, Adrienne. I appreciate that. And welcome, everyone. It's nice to see a lot of you on the call today. I'm truly honored to be sharing this portion of the process, the grant process. I would like to start off by saying that I originally I came into this process kind of mid-game. So I kind of hit the ground running, and was quite enjoyed working with David and Stephen, and then future stakeholders and partners that we had with this project. So with that, part of this grant project was a huge portion is to be sure that we had educational materials and assets for teachers who wanted to talk about this history, right? We have the exhibits, we have all these great resources, but how can educators talk about this in the classroom? So, like I said, I came in mid-game, but before, the vision was that this commission would be working with Carolina K through 12 at UNC Chapel Hill to do this work. And with that relationship, we would move forward with creating an education workshop and components that would result in having lesson plans and other resources for teachers and educators. Well, at the time when I came in, the position was vacant at Carolina K through 12. I did not have an education specialist at the time. And so there was a lot of moving blocks. And so with all that, all those things came together. And last fall of last year, I was able to hire Dr. Shafante Desinor. She is my education and interpretation specialist here with the African American Heritage Commission. And so I hired her, brought her on, and I said, this is the work plan. This is what we got to do. And how are we going to get this done? And Shafante hit the ground running. And once we were able to connect with Carolina K through 12, previous director, Christy Norris, who we thank so much for your help, we were also able to connect with Corey Greer Banks, who's now at Carolina K through 12 doing amazing work. But those two came together and just started working. And not even just that, we had another partner that came in that really was excited about the Africa to Carolina project, and that is the African Studies program at UNC Chapel Hill as well. And I would be remiss not to acknowledge Lori today as for doing and helping with this work and also initiating it. So all three of these ladies hit the ground running to put on an education workshop for the commission that really addressed all aspects of this history, the exhibits, and acknowledging many different ways that educators can engage in this history, right? So the plan was, once these ladies came together and they got a plan, they decided to do a workshop for educators. And this workshop would be a field trip of sorts for educators to have 2 days to engage with not just the history and the Africa to Carolina project, but also historic sites, and engage with the artist team to really learn on both ends on how they could come together and get aid in creating lesson plans and resources and materials. So with all that, what you see here is some images from the workshop. Like I said, this was a team effort. So we had over, I believe, 20 educators that participated in this workshop, registering from all across the state. But one of our key components of this grant was to be sure that educators in the county, the community was getting and being sure to have this resource and this access so that they could bring their students to Brunswick Town, Fort Anderson, and engage with this art piece. Because, I mean, we can't have something so great like this at a site like that, educational site, a historic site, without having some type of materials to engage with it. So with that, the educators were tasked with creating lesson plans, and that would correlate with Africa to Carolina. They got a chance to visit historic Edenton, which, as Adrienne mentioned before, is one of the sites, and tour not just the engage with the Africa to Carolina history, but the community members. I also want to thank State Historic Sites for being a part of this workshop experience, because as many of you know, or if you don't, State Historic Sites is part of the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. So we've had so much support from our colleagues from across the field to be sure that educators have these resources. All that to say is, this was a wonderful experience. I'm very proud of the team, and we had so many people helping with this. Now, presently, those three ladies are presenting this work in this workshop at conferences. So this past fall, they just presented, and they were working towards other presentations moving forward at other conferences to educators about this work, about this history. And it's just amazing to see how, from what Shavante has told me, how excited educators are truly to have resources and have people making resources for them to engage in this history. So all that to say is I could go on and on and on about how amazing these ladies are, but I will say what came out of it was 3 lesson plans that we will be now working with our DNCR education team to see how we can streamline this moving forward once the site is complete. We are so excited to also be sure to include our educators in all aspects of this experience moving forward. So we're hoping that they will be able to take part in the unveiling experience, and also crossing fingers that we'll at some point have more money to do more workshops. I think that one thing that was really great about this experience is how people came out of the woodwork to help, and it resulted in something truly wonderful. So with that, I won't go too far because I know that we needed time for the artist team to talk about their piece. But again, to Adrian's point, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop in the chat, and I'll be sure that we address them. And with that, I am going to transition our time to the artists, Stephen Hayes and David Wilson, so they can talk about the art piece.
All right. Thank you so much, Adrian and Natalie, for setting the table for this evening's presentation. Thank you all for joining us this evening. I always like to thank the Lord opening up for this opportunity to work on this project. It's a truly divine blessing to be able to have this creativity and to work on projects that are truly meaningful. It's a blessing as well to share in a creative vision with my design team member and creative partner, Stephen Hayes, and as well as working with the larger project team of the commission. Everybody's been so helpful and so supportive of Stephen and I's process and method. And, not every public art project is like that. So we really appreciate having a lot of the support that we've had over the process of a couple of years now working towards this vision that you'll see here in the presentation. Stephen, did you want to say anything before we kind of jump into the presentation?
No, I just want to tell everybody thank you for being a part of this and listening to what we have to say.
Perfect. All right, so without further ado, you see this is the Africa Carolina final design presentation that will be sited down at Fort Anderson in Winnebago, North Carolina. You can go to the next slide, please. So a little bit of background before we kind of look at the art, how we began and how we got to this point. When we first received notice that we were blessed to get the grant through ZSR, and again, that's another really awesome blessing. Is like I don't know how many organizations were vying for one of these grants, but to be selected, I know there was a great many of them, right? It wasn't just like 3 or 4. It was, it was a number of organizations who were hoping to receive funding through ZSR for one of these important community-based art grants, and for us to receive it again was just tremendous. And once we got that news, Stephen was on the precipice of heading over to Senegal for a residency that he was honored to receive. And so we kind of had some loose ideas on what we thought the art could look like. But as we worked towards kind of getting our final, thoughts together, we stayed in communication as best as we could through email, text messages, to kind of, see how things were tracking. He had inspiration while he was there, and, we would share that. And once he finally came back, we got together in his studio and just started sketching out some concepts for what the art, could be. And he had inspiration while he was there, that started to really, place some guardrails and some form and some structure around our initial ideas for the art before he left for his residency. So you can go to the next slide, and this will give you some visual ideas of what the art will look like. So you see 4 Well, this is just one of four representations of the bronze figures that Stephen will work, as Adrian and Natalie had referenced, through his process of life casting to create. You see here, which is a representation of an adult uh, female.
Yeah.
You know, this will be something that will be mounted on these plaques or these pedestals, as you can see, to kind of lift them up off the surface of the plaza. And then there's a smaller, I think we'll get a little bit closer in. If you can zoom in, I don't know, can you zoom in just a little bit? You can see there on the front of the, yes, like right in there where it says 2425, yes. So right there, that's where you'll see each one of these. There'll be four total, and each one of these pedestals will have a section. Yeah, a bronze plaque that will have a section of Miss Jackie Shelton Green's prose. Stephen, you want to talk a little bit just about the bronze and the pedestals as we have this image parked here for now?
Yes. So, like David was saying, so Miss Jackie Shelton's part of her poem will be on each pedestal where that plaque is, that little rectangle is. And above it will be a casting that I'll end up doing of four individuals in bronze. So the process is a plaster, where I do plaster gauze, placing on the person's skin to get the contours of their body and everything to create these sculptures, which they will be plaster and then they will be turned into bronze later on down the line. So, we're interested in casting four people because I like to use the human body as a part of the work and connect with the community. Because at the end of the day, this is not only a sculpture that I create, but it's also for the community, and I want community people being involved with the process of the sculpture.
No, and that's a great point. Can you zoom back out, please? Yeah, there you go. Thank you. So you can see, all angles, a left kind of side angle, a right side angle, a frontal view, and then a kind of a top-down drone type view. And these will be placed in a manner to where you should be able to get access around each one of these bronze pedestals of the figures and really take in all the wonderful detail Steve is able to capture through his process. Go to the next slide, please. So there'll be two adults, an adult male and adult female, and then a youth male and a youth female. And Stephen, you want to talk a little bit about how we kind of landed to, coming up with that 2 and 2?
Yeah, so we was, thinking about a compass like north, south, east, and west, but also thinking about how do we, also show different levels of people, like two adults and two children, but also having, one of each sexes. So just want to show how they move people around and the amount of people that they move around, and not only the amount, but the genders and the age ranges and stuff of people that were shipped from Africa to Carolinas. So that's how we landed on wanting to do four people, using as a direction map, north, south, east, and west.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then you'll see too, if you look down at the young male that's there at the bottom, the kind of the drone view, you'll see the circular image right kind of above the bronze plaque area. That'll be a small kind of rounded out space where you can leave some type of divination or token of remembrance or respect for those who took that perilous journey and not on their own, accord, that were forced into taking that horrendous through the Middle Passage here to the coast of the Americas. So we initially wanted to have something maybe that was at the base of the bronze sculptures, but after some dialogue with the commission and wanting to kind of lift these bronze elements up off the ground and kind of give them their due respect and their honor, we still wanted some place where we could allow folks to leave a little token. It could be a coin or a shell or a letter, right? And still make it easy for the commission to when we think about the work, we try not to be too high-minded on the creative side. We're always trying to think of the functionality of the work as well, and for whom we're bequeathing it to. So there at Fort Anderson, we didn't want something where they'd have to come out on a regular basis and keep collecting items off the ground, and maybe they fall down inside of a crevice or something and start to become kind of a nuisance. So having them kind of right up at waist, or a little bit above waist level, where you can easily kind of take the things out and place them in a easily disposable collection type of element, served it a little bit better, but still having that opportunity where you could pay some sort of respect while you're there, looking at the bronze and reading the poetry and taking it all in, we felt was important. You can go to the next slide, please. So we'll talk about another element. You'll see everything comes together as we move forward through the presentation. This is a central bowl hemisphere, and it contains a narrative art glass on top of it. Next slide, please. Stephen, you want to talk about how we kind of landed at this point?
Yes. All right. So while I was in Senegal, I had the opportunity to go to Gorée Island. And while in Gorée Island, I got to see the Door of No Return. And in that point of seeing the Door of No Return, they showed us this offering bowl where people were allowed the opportunity to pour water into this bowl as a way of paying homage to that area. So seeing that made me think, well, maybe why don't we create a offering bowl as well in the center of the four figures, but not allow people to like pour water in there. But that's why we have the four different offering bowls in front of each person, for them to pay their homage and do some type of offering to the land in which our people landed on. So that's why we came to with that central bowl piece, and then working with David and figuring out how we could create this narrative that will go into the central bowl piece. So each person will go north, south, east, and west of this bowl.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. And that's another great opportunity to always in working with Stephen. I learned a lot about I was always more of a two-dimensional artist, working more on a flat plane of something that might be either directly incorporated into a surface or a facade, like a mural, or even in my fine art work, within the four confines of a frame. But working with Stephen, having this opportunity to really introduce my 2D work into a larger kind of sculptural narrative, and work with him to come up with ways that functionality and budget wise and narrative and metaphorically, all kind of comes together as a really, fun and, great to work with and learn from over the years of he and I working together on the team. So you can go to the next slide and you can get a little bit better look, I think, at how to look like from a top-down version. And that's just the bowl isolated on its own. You can see in the upper left there, it'll have the glass. It'll be created on glass. And if any of you are familiar with the Chavis Park mural that I created, that's all glass, and it was made in a way that all the art is produced in what is called a ceramic frit process. So all of the art imagery is generally printed on top of the glass, and it's probably going to be on the bottom part. It's generally on the the part that's kind of away from the elements or people's fingers or any type of elements that could damage the art once it's printed on the glass. And then it goes through a huge oven that bakes all the colors and the pigments and the imagery into the glass. So it's not something that you can just take a coin or a key and scratch off if you want to. It like becomes part of the actual materiality of the glass. But all this imagery will be on the bottom part of the glass, but you'll be able to look through it and see it. So it'll kind of have like this fossil type of effect to it, where you'll look through, I forget the total thickness of that glass, but you'll look through some thickness of glass, and then you'll see kind of this imagery hovering or embedded into the glass substrate. And you also be able to see when you're looking down as like a reflection of like the sky, or the sun may be kind of reflecting off of it, or some clouds, or even birds passing by overhead. So we wanted this opportunity where you as the viewer will be immersed in the art and have this connection still to your adjacencies and your surroundings, other nature, or you might be able to look across the glass and see the reflection of someone else's face looking down and taking in the imagery. And can you go to the next slide, please? I think that gives you. Go ahead.
And we're also like playing with, we'll also be working with water as well with this piece. So there will be probably like an inch layer of water going over this piece of glass as well. So you'll have those reflections will play a lot with the water. If somebody touches it, if there's a ripple in the water and stuff over this glass.
Yes. Water, of course, was the key element that brought those enslaved here to the coast, and it's cited right there near the coast. So we wanted this, again, we're always trying to think of how we can utilize the landscape as a sculptural dialogue as well, and not merely as a surface for the artwork to sit upon. So having this water incorporated into the piece in a way that it's naturally flowing, it's not going to require like any pump systems or anything like that. Again, trying to make it really simple and turnkey for the staff and the folks at Fort Anderson who will receive it, and keep it, keep the maintenance up on it and everything we felt was important. And here's just an isolated kind of look at what the artwork will be. We wanted a way where we could tell the story of those beyond just being enslaved, what skills and talents that they brought with them, and how that endures as a legacy to this day, and how it made an immediate impact upon their arrival. Without it being too didactic and museum-like, right? Because you can go up the pathway into the museum, and through the programming that Natalie and Adrian were speaking of, learn more about this history, even through technology. I believe there's going to be some type of QR code that'll take you to, a larger site via the commission, where you can dive a little bit deeper into, carpentry and brick masonry and science and invention, civil engineering, some of the fields of endeavors and lines of work that you see mentioned here in this glass piece. Again, without it being, too overwhelming with a bunch of information, but at least kind of serve as an entry point for greater understanding and education. Next slide, please. So there's another element is commemorative benches. We think, as Natalie had mentioned, we wanted a place that could, a piece of art that could allow you to have some time to sit and reflect and take in what it is you were experiencing. So you can go to the next slide, please. So we have these commemorative benches that'll flank this central bowl element, and the four bronze pedestals that'll surround the central bowl. And you can see here kind of a side elevation of what those benches will look like. They'll have this opportunity where you kind of enter in, but also traverse and move inside of, have a seat, again, contemplate, take some information. And we wanted it too where maybe school groups can come and kids can all sit down and listen to an instructor to talk and lead through some of the history about the site and the art plaza. Next slide, please. And these are just more breakouts. You see they kind of have this curvilinear shape to them. You want to talk about how we kind of landed with maybe like the ship hall, Stephen, and then how it turned into these benches?
Yeah. So, we wanted to show like that Brooks slave ship diagram where they show the depiction of how they put the people inside the ships and shipped them here on a 6 to 8 week journey. And, I had the thought of thinking like, well, let's create these benches where they kind of sit, people can sit right beside this imagery, but not make these benches comfortable, make them just enough room for people to sit on them, but not to be able to like rest and be able to take a break. Because, at the end of the day, we use art as a way of teaching and learning. and involving the community into it. And when they sit down on this bench, they're not going to be wanting to sit there forever because it's not going to be an 18-inch bench. It's going to be just enough for them to be able to sit, but not to be able to relax because a 6 to 8 week journey that we're thinking about where these people are shipped here and with no say with their body. And I don't want people to be able to rest on these things and just be comfortable. I want them to feel uncomfortable as they're sitting there and learning about this stuff. So that's how we got to the shape of this arch or hull of a ship, because we wanted to as a remembrance of a ship. So that's how we got the shape of the benches.
Yes, yes, and that's again a beautiful narrative of how these shapes they're functional. The benches are functional, but they also have layers of embedded metaphor and meaning into them. And there's a way too when even though like Stephen was just discussing the overall kind of size and composition of them don't lend to you laying down and eating a sandwich or something on them. You will have this representation of the slave diagram on the interior of the benches. So as you rest your back against it, even if it's just for a moment, there's always this counterbalance of not feeling comfortable, but also in some way feeling hopefully some type of support, right? Like understanding of this treacherous journey, but how, we still endure to this day, right? And we remember and we honor and we celebrate and we recognize. So it kind of serves a dual purpose of uncomfortability and pain, and not pain in the sense that we want you to feel painful physically when you sit on the bench, right? But you understand what we're saying, like, you're remembering the pain through maybe the narrowness of the bench, or, it not being, again, your typical kind of relaxing bench that you might find in a park somewhere. But also having this opportunity where if you do kind of lean back just to take a load off for a moment to just think about everything you're taking in, you hopefully feel that that support and that wanting to push through of the ancestors that are spanning around the inside of this curved part of each bench as a way to kind of push through whatever maybe personal challenges you might be going through, even though they in no way compare, right? Like we can't compare maybe problems on our job with a 6 to 8 week passage packed tight like sardines in the hull of a slave ship. But if we in some way can kind of give some balance of hope and resilience to the remembrance of pain and suffering, we really wanted to try to capture that through these functional elements as well. Next slide, please. Just another oriented interfacing. Next slide, please. So this all will rest on a circular concrete plaza, and you can go to the next slide. And that's kind of a drone view of what it'll look like. There will be a small connecting pathway to the existing pathway there to lead you down from the Fort Anderson Museum. And there you see the central bowl element and 4 bronze elements atop their pedestals with the bronze plaques. And you see the flanking 2 commemorative benches. And then you see there's enough space kind of move about, the entire perimeter of the piece. And even on the interior too, we're always thinking of like ADA requirements and all accessibility for all abilities. And then at the lower area, the smaller thumbnails, you'll see these kind of different, waving and moving lines. We initially wanted to maybe treat the plaza with the diagram of how the different slave ships moved through their journey through the Middle Passage, and show where different ships went to drop off slaves and then return back to their destinations. But we instead chose to treat these on the outside of the benches instead of on the plaza. So you can kind of see there how we'll use like an acid etching treatment to provide a different color to the exterior of these benches that'll surround the central artistic elements. Next slide, please. So the overall site, if you want to go to that next slide, you'll see this has just got all of our kind of numbers, our working numbers that we'll use in our our engineering and shop drawings and CNC layouts and all the kind of the technical stuff that needs to go in on the front end before you actually start building stuff. But it's a little bit, bigger viewing for, what the actual piece will look like, minus the concrete plaza that's underneath of it. So next slide, please. And then that gives you some semblance of what it will look like to scale there on the site near the existing kind of pavilion and the surrounding kind of natural landscape. And if you were to look off to your right, I don't know how many yards, but you'll clearly be able to see the coast. We wanted this really kind of close proximity and open sight lines to the coast as well, so you can, hopefully feel like you're, in that time and space and kind of transport you back to the era where, those first enslaved disembarked. And even this one here kind of shows you an older perspective of how those slave route diagrams may have been, etched into the plaza. But overall, that's our presentation. And if you have any questions, we're definitely here to answer them. And thank you again so much for sitting through our presentation. And thank you, Adrian and Dr. Brothers and Natalie and the rest of the commission, Brenda Miller Holmes, CSR. There's a lot of people to thank, Jackie Shelton Green. Everybody who's just supported Stephen and I on our journey.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, David and Stephen. And again, if you have questions, please feel free to leave them in the chat, but also the way that we have the Zoom set up, if you do raise your virtual hand, we can unmute you and have you ask us the question directly if that is what you would prefer. Oh, we've got one, Dr. Johnson. Dr. Johnson, I think we were able to unmute you.
Okay, but you can't see me, but that's
no, but I can hear you.
Okay. I was wanting to, as chair of the African American Heritage Commission, I want to thank everyone for being here, and also just to give my shout out to David and Stephen for staying the course with us over all the iterations, all the input. But I especially, and this is what I wanted to say, Adrian and Natalie, y'all did a good job. But I do need to say this. Thank you to my commissioners, because they gave the support for this, both spiritually with their intellect and just being as commissioners. They came out to some of the events, and I just want to thank them for showing up. And I know because the Commissioner Rhodes was definitely there when we went to Wilmington, and it's Commissioner Rhodes, and it's also our former commissioner. Help me, Adrian.
Pauline Hankins, Judge Hankins.
Judge Hankins, yes, who were two strong advocates and were weighed in. And I also want to thank my vice chair, Dr. Tamara Holmes Brothers, who has served both in the Arts Council and with our commission. So that was all I really wanted to make sure that I got that in, and to also say that this is exciting to see us at this point now.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. I see we did just get a comment in the chat. Thank you, Camille, for joining us as well. We appreciate, especially our Brunswick County folks, for being part of this process. That has been very, very important. I see we have another question from Ann Chin. Matt, can you assist with getting her? There we go.
Okay.
We should be able to hear you now, Ann.
Okay. I'm with the Middle Passage Ceremonies and Port Markers Project and have been involved in monitoring the development over several years as the state addresses its Middle Passage history. We are in the process of doing detailed research on each one of the documented arrival locations. And this information will be included in a QR code. So I am just curious in how that information that we're generating, we can ensure that it will be part of this effort to acknowledge this history.
Thank you, Anne, for raising that question. So we have been in close communications with Michelle Lanier and the team at State Historic Sites to make sure that we are addressing and making sure that on site that we are layering in opportunities for interpretation. Some of those plans are not 100% firmed up as of this moment in time, but we've talked about things like RAC cards. I know it's going to be a moment, but into the future, I know our colleagues at State Historic Sites eventually are going to be doing some exhibit updates, but also making sure that staff on site are trained and ready to assist in interpreting this history. But I have noted your feedback, and we will make sure to have that reflected in our conversations.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, we'll give it just a couple more minutes here. If you're still formulating your questions, again, feel free to leave it in the chat. No need to unmute if you'd prefer not to. But again, thank you for everyone for joining us this evening, and thank you for your questions and comments as well. As I'm sure we reiterated throughout the presentation, this project does not exist in isolation. This project is very much a reflection of the folks who have joined us in this room and other folks who were not able to join us this evening. So we so appreciate the support and the collaboration of everyone involved. It has been, I think now more than ever, we continuously see the importance that we are sharing and interpreting our history. And again, reinforcing that this project has been incredibly detailed research, and we're really excited to be able to have this as a resource available for folks to be able to come and visit and learn more. Oh, and then I see Commissioner McCain asked us a question. So one of our commissioners, as Dr. mentioned, what can they do to continue to assist in 2026 to make our work more known across the state? I think really the answer to that is spreading the word. Each of us here is an example of someone who we all have kind of our communities that we are often engaging with. So opportunities that you have within your own personal network to be sharing our work is much appreciated. We have a bunch of resources on our website related to this project and beyond. So, or if there's specific conversations that you all think would be valuable for the commission to lean in on, making those connections. We did share our contact information in the chat earlier, so we are always open to engaging and talking with people. Joy, thank you for joining us this evening. We so appreciate your feedback. And we've been so grateful to work with David and Stephen as well. I think that this is really an incredible piece. I've not seen anything like it, so it'll be really a wonderful thing to have available to folks. All right. Wonderful. Well, with that, I don't think we have any more questions. Again, thank you for joining us. We have recorded this, so we will be sending it out if you joined us a little bit later. And I know there were a few folks that registered that weren't able to come, so we will make sure that this is shared widely. And in the interim, if you have any questions or anything for us, you know where to find us. And we appreciate for joining us this evening. I hope you all take care.